Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another Pioneers Pathway podcast, joined by me, Sharia, and my good friend, Mr. Villani. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, thank you. How about you?
Very well, my friend. Very well, my friend. It's been a very busy week,
Good
hasn't
stuff,
it?
good stuff. It's been a busy week, and it's also obviously also been a really busy week in the world, in the news, and loads of things have happened, and loads to unpack.
Absolutely. You had, the festive season of Diwali, and at the same time, in the economic world, is quite busy with the budget and the US elections, hasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It has obviously happy Diwali to you as well. And I hope
Happy Diwali
all
to
of
you.
our listeners are celebrating and enjoying the celebration. And also happy Halloween, another big day in the Western world. It's actually quite interesting. I saw an article about the economic impact of festivals, cultural events, and cultural festivals on the economy, right? And it's massive because people spend a lot of money on on celebrating and doing things, and without that, there would be a gap in our economy.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, people start budgeting for Christmas quite early on, don't they? Because it can get quite expensive
Yep,
with all
yep.
those presents. And that leads quite well.
If you look in the supermarkets, I was just going to say the Christmas decorations are already out. People are buying. People are buying their Christmas gifts already before the prices sort of go up. It's a big time of the year. And it's big for the businesses as well. Planning and things like that. It's a big time.
Absolutely. That leads quite well to today's topic, which is the budget.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure all of our British listeners, but maybe some people abroad, probably heard about the budget. It's sort of this, isn't it? It's a sort of semi-annual sort of event, one of the biggest events in British political calendars, other than elections, right? Um, uh, when the Chancellor goes and stands sort of outside number 11. Is it number 11,
Yeah, it's number
Downing Street?
11. Yeah.
Number 11, right? And they hold up their red briefcase and they tell the world where we're going to spend our money,
Yeah, absolutely.
right?
So,
Yeah, big day, big
have,
day, big day.
have you had a chance to, look into this one?
Yeah, the budget's big. The budget's big, and there's a lot to unpack. But yeah, reading the highlights, quite a lot has happened. It's a big shift away from the previous Conservative administrations. So it'll be interesting to see what the sort of the impact is. But they are going bold. They are going bold. But I think underlying most of it is the huge economic burden on businesses, entrepreneurs, sort of industry, right? The burden is going on them. And we'll see what sort of impact that has in the long term. But it's definitely a big shift towards that. You see the sort of the corporate, I know corporation tax, they've maintained that level. That's 25%. That was actually increased under Rishi Sunak as Chancellor, right? But things like national insurance contributions and minimum wages are going up, and that's going to be a big dent in businesses' budgets.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to get more on what are your thoughts on that? Because personally, I'm not a big fan of it, right? Because at the minute, investor confidence is probably,
Hmm.
it's at a low, right? So personally, I feel the measures that should have been taken should have been ones that help boost businesses and make it easier for them. I think this is basically a huge step back. What about you?
So it's interesting, right? Because uh, nobody wants to tax. Nobody wants to tax, and nobody really wants to put more burdens on businesses and things like that. There's a gap in the budgets, and they need to fill it somehow, right? They need to fill it somehow whilst also sort of maintaining the economic growth, right? And if you want to spend, you have to tax. That's as simple as that. Otherwise, you're gonna start borrowing, and it's too unsustainable, right? So that's quite an important thing we have to sort of consider, right? We want the government to be able to do its duties, do the stuff we expect it to do. So that requires money, right? But no, I do think that there's a heavy burden on businesses, and it's constraining them financially. It's constraining them, and it's not allowing them to invest, right? And investment's what's needed to sort of spur growth, and get the economy back up and running.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like with anything, there are trade-offs involved, but the question is this trade-off really necessary, right? Have they gone on the wrong end of the spectrum?
I think it's there's a balance, right? There's a balance. But the problem we have in the UK is that we are lagging behind internationally, right? And so we have to compete against emerging economies, economies in the Middle East, in Asia, which are a low tax sort of environment compared to the West, low regulation, and they are expanding on scales never been seen before, right? So we have to sort of balance between that. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind, right? So we want to be able to sort of be able to do as much as we can and spend as much as we can, but we also have to make sure that we are as low tax compared to the other people in the world.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Traditionally, the West has, in recent years, been a lot more high tax, right? I
Yeah,
mean, but you look at the Middle East, they are pretty much zero, right? And
yeah,
that's why
yeah,
a lot of businesses, they do want to be in low tax environments because obviously at the end of the day, who wants to pay tax, right? But at the
yeah,
same
yeah.
time, you do want to balance that with, providing your public services, whatever, because the NHS, it's very expensive, right?
The
And you
NHS,
do
the
need to be able
NHS
to
is very
provide for
expensive.
it. And you do
But
need to be
the
able to
but the
provide for
issue,
it.
Sharia, so it's just to interrupt on the NHS, right? It's expensive, but there's a lot of wastage in spending. There's a lot of wastage in spending, not just in the NHS, but across the board, right? And there's a lot of ways in which we should and we can be able to reduce costs, but also maintain our services and get them even better, right? Because if you look, life expectancy isn't going up as high as it should be. People are dying. Poverty is still at record levels, and there were still significant issues which we are under delivering on, right? So it requires sort of a gradual shift and more of a renewed focus on government goals, but also more value for money being spent, I think.
No, absolutely, I agree with that. But if you're sitting quite, okay, think of it like a corporation, right? You have your CEOs, you have your CFOs. They can't really control the efficiency of expenditure at, the entry levels, the lower levels, for example. So it's obviously going to be a similar thing for the NHS. So how would you go about doing that? Because it's very hard.
I think it's a vision. It's a vision which needs to be begun at the top, right? And I think they need to set a precedent, and then it slowly goes into it funnels down into the organization, right? I also think, and this is probably a bit of a controversial statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it's too big of an organization. They do too much and they're too big. And when you become too big, it's uncontrollable, right? So obviously, like the NHS is split in NHS England, NHS Scotland, NHS Wales. I think England is a huge country in just itself, right? That they're too big and they're doing too much, right? So I think there needs to be a lot more decentralization and a lot more bringing in private sector involvement, right? Because it's a sentiment agreed from like Milton Friedman and all these economists and in history, right? The private sector, if it's managed in a correct way and managed with state influence, is more efficient and more productive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that. But then again, it's going to take a lot of time to, implement such a thing. And 5 years is a very short amount of period. I mean, you look at every sort of political party, whilst they say, we are aiming, 10, 15 years down the line, in reality, they're only looking ahead as far as the next election. Now, is that something that, the Labour Party really wants to, go ahead and implement? And obviously, all these things will have associated costs. So are these costs something that they are willing to go ahead, especially when they're not guaranteed to be in power in the next 5 years? Because, I don't know if you've seen, but there was a poll out, and I think right now the Conservative Party have overtaken Labour in terms of popularity again.
Change.
Sorry, you cut out there.
No, I was just saying how rapidly things can change,
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you go
right?
back, say,
It's mad. It's mad.
150 days, right? You had everyone, sort of abusing the Conservatives, and now it's the complete opposite. I mean, both parties at the minute, they are, in the best of scenarios, but Conservatives are still marginally, ahead.
What I think, what I think is a potential, maybe a solution to that is to depoliticize a lot more of the processes behind how our countries run, right? Yeah, politicians, they're elected, right? But if we can bring stability and we can bring more long-term thinking, right? And we can bring in more developed minds. There's still a big sort of political bubble in Westminster, and those are the people controlling it. But if we bring in sort of more expertise, more outside of the political spectrum, and we bring in more diverse minds who will stick around for a lot longer than politicians will, I think that's something which could definitely work, right? I am another controversial figure to talk about, Dominic Cummings. So Dominic Cummings, I don't know if our viewers know, Dominic Cummings used to be a special advisor to Boris Johnson. He also was the architect of the Vote Leave campaign, the really successful Vote Leave campaign. They did very well. And one of the things Dominic Cummings was really famous for was like he wrote a blog about hiring weirdos and misfits to 10 Downing Street and to sort of run our country, right? And okay, maybe it doesn't sound the greatest thing in the world, but he's got a point, right? He's got a point that if you hire diverse minds, people with distinct sort of mindsets, knowledges, experiences, that can really help, right? There's a lot of career politicians in there, but there's a lot of ex-lawyers, ex-bankers, ex people, ex-journalists. That's the other one who are there, and they may be good at their job, but are they distinct from the other journalists there, right? No, they come from the same background, they've got the same skills. If we bring in more people together, more people who can hopefully stick around for longer, then we got that long-term vision, which happens in the Middle East, right? If we compare to the Middle East, they stick around forever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Liam, I want to move on
Yeah.
to something I read in the budget, right? So I have the exact wording here. The Office for Budget Responsibility forecasts growth to increase to 2% in 2025 before declining to 1.6% in 2029. What are your thoughts on that? Because personally, I think that's a bit ambitious.
Um. Again, the so that's the Office for National Statistics or
Office for Budget
OSB.
Responsibility.
OBS, sorry. Budget responsibility. So yeah, I don't really think forecasting and economic forecasting is the greatest thing in the world. And I'll tell you why. Because you can never predict a model. You can never have a falsifiable 100% recognized sort of model for what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So I tend to take those statistics with a bit of a pinch of salt, right? Nobody could predict the economic impact of COVID. Nobody can predict the Russia-Ukraine war and all these things. But what I would say is that so it's 2% growth, wasn't it? Two
Yeah,
percent growth, and
2%
then it goes down to
2025.
1.6.
Yeah, in 2029. So 5 years from now.
I think with the current state of play with the finances and the current tax burden on businesses, who are the people who are going to drive the growth? Fundamentally, that's them. It's the businesses, and it's the small businesses, small entrepreneurs, family businesses, things like that. I think that is very over realistic. Um, so but what I would say is you take these statistics with a bit of a pinch of salt, and you sort of you just look at it more laterally. And I always like to say, I get more of an understanding of the economy by walking down my high street and by talking to the locals, the local shopkeepers, my family who are in an office 9 till 5, the people on the ground, they'll know it. I'm not the statistics can be good. The statistics can be all really good stuff, but it's the people and it's the people's experiences which are the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I can't
What
disagree with that.
what about you? What about you? What's your thoughts with it all?
Look, I agree. A model cannot be, 100% perfect, right? You take, even if you look at like a financial model, right? Your simple DCF, that is contingent on, a billion different assumptions. Now, if another
Mm,
person has a slightly different set of assumptions, you'll get a completely different result, right? Economists love the word ceteris paribus. Everything else constant but
mm,
one.
mm.
Now, if you're constant, if that
Yeah,
but one constant is different to someone else's, you
yeah,
could have a completely different result, right? But coming back to this, I agree. I think 1.6% is overly ambitious,
yeah,
especially
yeah,
when you're increasing taxes. You're making it a lot harder for smaller businesses to operate. That's really going to affect them, right? And they are the key drivers behind growth. Even your big corporations, right? If they see that, for example, the minimum wage has gone up, they're not going to be hiring as many people, right? They're going to find a way to automate the same process, and that way, loads of livelihoods are at stake. So, whilst something might look good on paper, you also have to bear
yeah.
in mind there are a lot of unintended consequences behind it.
Mm, mm. Yeah, yeah. No, exactly, exactly. I totally agree with that. Here's an interesting thought though. I'm gonna put you on the spot here, if that's okay.
Go for it. Go for it.
Go for it. Okay. So imagine you were the chancellor. And
Okay.
I'm not asking for sort of coherent policy, specific, intricate policy. But if you were chancellor today, what would be your vision for the next 5 years? I think it's 5 years is the fixed term parliament act. So in the next 5 years before the next election, what is your vision? What would you do? Maybe there's specific things you would do, but what would you want the country to change, and how would you change it?
Well, look, first of all, I think the UK is in dire need of investment, right? That is the biggest thing that I think the UK needs at the moment. We need to find a way to make ourselves a prominent exporter, right? We're not going to be, exporting, agriculture, right? Because we're not at the stage now. We're way past that stage of having that competitive advantage. We need to invest into R&D and leverage our technology and become leaders in STEM, right? We need to become a key player there so we can export key services and our engineering capabilities. That's where I think the biggest investment lies, right? And once you invest in all these different places, you can become a key exporter, and that way you can completely change
Yeah,
your, cycle. Because right now the UK has a lot more outflows and inflows, and I think that needs to change, right? It's called a balance of
yeah.
books for a reason.
So 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 just to sort of focus in a bit more on exporting. We export a lot of services, right?
Yeah, but
Banking
to
is
look
really
about
huge in the UK. We're one of the leading banking.
Yeah,
Say that
but
again?
sorry, just to cut you off with that. UK, I read an article, right, a few months back. UK assets are nowhere near as attractive as they were at one point, right? So that whole,
Mm.
finance, being a lucrative thing, that's also slowly slipping away. And we need to make sure that doesn't.
But going back sort of exporting, there's a lot of services, right?
Hmm.
Education's a big exporter. Although saying that
Yeah.
with the addition of the VAT on private school fees. I don't know how lucrative that's going to be going forward. But it tends to be services. What do you think of industry, right? Are we protecting our industry? Are we going too much towards these sort of green technology and renewables that we are losing out on heavy manufacturing, sort of things like steel and coal and things like that? Are we hollowing out our manufacturing industry, and so we haven't got anything else other than services to export?
Well, okay, so I'm going to take the classic example of cars, right? China saw this whole like EV trend years before. I mean, I would say they saw it before anyone else, but they were the best to react to it, right? China is now one of the leading players in, EV cars.
Yeah,
I mean, EVs are cars, but yeah, they are one of the leading players. It's too
yeah,
late, I think, for the UK or any other country in the West to try and become a leading player in that. You have to find something else. You have to find something unique, right? So you have to, I mean, you have that, primary, secondary,
mm,
tertiary, sector for a reason. You need to focus more on the tertiary now. While it's already a bigger part, you need to find something else, right?
yeah.
Find something new. I don't know what it is or what it's going to be. At the
So
top
we're
of my head
making
right now.
UK a name for making a name for
Exactly,
ourselves, right?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Because right now that name
making a
is
name
going
for
away,
yeah, yeah,
right? I mean, going back to the point of education,
yeah,
lots of
yeah,
people they are scared to come to the UK as an international student because they're not sure about their future career, opportunities. And that is a huge deterrent. And
yeah,
that being a deterrent means you're getting
yeah, yeah,
less,
yeah,
investment.
yeah.
So, what are
Yeah,
your
yeah,
thoughts?
yeah.
What would you do?
So just going on to another key pillar, I think wanted to is important. Uh, so I agree with you on the investment. I agree with you on developing an export market. I think two other key areas I think is educating our workforce. So that's reskilling, and that's also primary, secondary education, right? Because we're lagging behind on that, and if we educate the next generation of engineers, mathematicians, scientists, not just all of the other liberal arts and sort of humanities subjects, that's going to be what drives us. I'm not trying to discredit. I'm a political science student. I studied politics, so I'm not discrediting humanities at all. But what I'm saying is we need to have the breadth. And I think our science, engineering, and maths has been hollowed out, and that's not enough, and people are leaving to go elsewhere. So I think education reskilling is important. There's figures on sort of there's a lot of people in the population who are more than capable of working, but they choose not to because they either don't have the skills or they're on annual sick leave for too long, like terminal sick leave, right? So we need to solve that. We need to get people back into the workforce working, right? Because that's sort of tax receipts, which is going to go towards financing and budgeting and things like that. I think that's important, but I also think importantly infrastructure, right? I think, and this is something the budget doesn't talk much about, but our infrastructure is lagging behind. Everyone talks about HS2, but that's been going on for ages. We've got things like uh, under capacity with airports in London, and that needs to be reassured. Transportation, because that's what powers the economy, right? That's what's going to get people spending. When transportation is good, when access is good, and when people can be efficient with their time, right? I don't know what the current rate of the timing to get from like London to Manchester is, but I'm pretty sure it's about. I know from London to Birmingham, it's about 2.5 hours, which can be cut in half if we can sort out our train services, right? And with that, you can then people can be traveling around. People are going to invest in the north, not just the south. That it's going to be so much more more of a level playing field.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the North-South divide has been a debate for years, right? I mean, long before we were even born and, where we were in
Yeah, yeah,
school, whatever, it was a huge thing, right?
yeah,
And that was the whole point behind HS2. You'll be able to, get from your workplace to your home quicker, so that way it'll be easier for you to, commute to
yeah,
work. But, after spending, I don't know how many
yeah.
billions, it hasn't come to fruition, right? So
Yeah.
that's just been a
Hasn't come
huge
to fruition.
wastage. If we find a way to be more efficient with our resources and actually develop, similar projects, absolutely, these things can change, right?
Yeah. I also think underlying it is a people need to be open to risk. Governments need to be open to risk, and society just needs to be more of a risk-taking society, right? We need to take calculated risks. I'm not saying be overly ambitious, right? But take calculated risks, but be open to change and to new things, right? If we stick with the status quo, especially financially, nothing is going to ever change and nothing's going to ever get through that sort of cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there needs to be a huge, cultural shift as well. I mean, coming back to the education thing from a instead, I think in the UK we sort of take a negative, approach that okay, look, maths is too hard for me, science is too hard. End of the day, this is what's
Yeah.
going to help us in the future, right? As much as someone might enjoy doing, a humanity degree, you're not really going to be able to, provide much export value with that compared to, say, for example, an engineering student, right? Say an engineering student
Mhm.
goes works
Yeah.
for Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce engines are used all over the world. So that's a clear example. I'm sure there's countless other ones, but this is just like a very small example, and it just basically just shows the power. So I think there needs to be a huge sort of
Mm.
cultural shift there. I know Rishi started, he wanted to bring something. Was he making like in maths compulsory at A level, something like that, right? Do you remember? I think
Yeah.
he was doing
Obviously,
something
that's
like that.
probably out of the window now.
Yeah, I
But
mean
yes, he
that's
was
out
doing
the
that.
window
Yeah.
now. But if we were to introduce a
Yeah.
similar thing,
Yeah.
I don't think we would be able to, change the sort of dynamic of the economy. And I think that's what needs to be done. It needs a complete overhaul, in my opinion.
Anything, and that's not going to take overnight. That's not going to be overnight, but that's by having strong leadership, and that's by having strong leadership, right? One thing I will give credit to the situation now politically is that the Labour Party have a big majority, which is bad because they can do what they want, but it's also good because it brings stability, right? And one thing that we didn't have over the last, I think, maybe 3 or 4 years was stability, and that reduced our competitiveness and credibility across the world,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? And so
So
hopefully there's a bit more stability, yeah, going forward.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, assuming, it after 5 years we have a change in, political party, right? Say the Conservatives come in power. Do you think Kerry is the right person for the job? And currently, do you think Storm is the right person for the job?
I think Kemi ba I think Kemi Badenoch is a great person, and she is a strong leader, a very dominant character with a lot of strength and conviction in what she says and what she does, right? And I think she will do a sterling job at that. I give Keir Starmer credit. He is someone who has had a lot of time waiting for his promotion, right? And he's very clever and very experienced, right? But he is a person who came in not because of his benefits, but because of the negative things of his opposition, right? The only reason why he won was because of the faults in the Conservative Party, right? They won on the lowest voting share in the whole of the in recent history, right? The only reason why they managed to get all those seats were because there was a um, calculated sort of approach to that, and the Reform Party ate into the Conservative voting share. So do you know they aren't winning because people like them? It's because people don't like the others. All right. So once people start liking the others and the change in empathy changes, right, they're in a dire strait, right? And it's always very hard. The people in the opposition have it easy, right? Because they can make it whatever claim they want, and the attention isn't on them, right? And all their drawbacks. The Labour Party and the Labour government and Keir Starmer are in the spotlight, right? And nothing's going to be ever positive about it in the media.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm putting you on the spot a bit, right? How long do you think he lasts? Do you think he
Yeah.
makes it through the full 5 years?
This is Keir Starmer, right?
Yeah. Do you think Salah makes it
uh, uh,
through the full
my,
five
my, my,
years?
my, 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 my my hunch is that he will make it. You'll get in 5 years' time. You can dig up uh, uh, this episode, and then we can see if my prediction's right. But But I think he will be the person to lead the Labour Party into the next election. But I do not believe the Labour Party is going to be the same as it is today. And I'll tell you why. I don't think it's going to be as united as it is. There's loads of cracks within their foundations. So I think they will slowly lose seats to by-elections, to resignations, to things like that, switching affiliation. Already, one of the Labour Party MPs has already switched to being an independent, and that was after 2 months, right? It's going to slowly increase and things are going to happen, right? I think so, one of the other MPs got accused of punching a guy and was is now under police investigation. Things are going to happen, right? And slowly
Yeah.
it's going to start chipping away. So my prediction is that he's going to lose more of his majority, and it's going to be harder for him to govern.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's the cycle every party faces, isn't it? I mean, it's not unique to Labour. Generally, you see after like
Yeah.
a few years, even the
Do you
Conservative
know what?
Party, they start, you know, getting a lot of hate. It's only when you get like a new leader where and they bring on
Yeah,
like completely
yeah,
different policy where you see like, a slight change in tide, right? So, just before, when Theresa May was in power, right? You could see there
excitement.
was a
It's
slight
excitement.
decline.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, towards the end, right, there was a bit of a decline.
Mhm.
Then Boris comes along and say, I'm going to do Brexit. That's why he had a huge
Yeah.
spike. But then gradually, you notice that decline happen again. And then Rishi had like a slight bump up, and then again, you see that decline. So, it's all, it's trends
Yeah.
everywhere.
It's going to be the same with Keir Starmer. It's going to be the same with Keir Starmer. And yeah, it's going to be the same with all of them. But what they need to do is be clever with how they govern, be manipulative when they need to, but also do not wait for the next day to do what you need to do. Do it now. Start it now. Don't think that your position is infallible and you're invincible, right? Because you never know what's going to happen the next day. They've got to set the ground running and keep going from day one.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, Liam. I think that concludes what it has been
Yeah.
a very interesting discussion, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I have thoroughly
Yeah. No, it's
enjoyed,
been great. It's
discussing
been
the budget with you.
no. It's been great. It's been great. Yeah, and then I think next week we've got a special guest, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. He is a very, very smart man, and his job is basically giving advice to businesses, and that's business is what we love, isn't it?
Yeah, no. It's great. Obviously, I think we'll save the name and we'll advertise it so that people can, if you look on our social medias during the week, you'll be able to see who it is. But a very special guy, and a close connection to our past as well and our high school period. So very excited to have him on board.
Great, thank you so much, Liam.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Cool. See you next week then.